You were mentioning some stuff about children and stuff about kids and things like that, and about parenting. Even parenting is a good crash course in being able to test out your ability to think about your thoughts and your ability to like not overreact to stuff. And parents,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we see our kids doing something and we can't help but intervene. We can't help to take objection. It's almost like, it kind of reminds me of watching somebody play a video game and they can't make the jump that they need to make with Mario or whatever it is. And it's so frustrating. Like they keep dying in the same spot. And you watch your kids, make these same mistakes that you made. And you just want to take the controller from them and you want to, get to the next level or whatever. And you can't. You got to let them, you got to let them fail. You got to let them mess up. And I've noticed that with my own children, and it might be different for some other people, but yelling across the room when I'm sitting down about something that they're doing that I don't think is right, just it's not useful at all. And if you were to zoom out from that, and if you were to take a look at that, if somebody showed you a video of it, like, hey, here's you yelling at your kid the other day because they dripped their ice cream cone, all over the floor from coming in from outside because it was hot out or whatever, you would look at it and be like, oh yeah, like, man, I was totally irrational. But you don't think about, in the moment, you had a day, right? Like you worked, you did A, you did B, you did C. So you kind of have some justification, some excuses on why you're irritated. And you've told your kid this 17 million times, and the kid's way too old to have this, ice cream dripping all over the floor, like, and to be like not paying attention to it, and also not have any desire or at least show that they recognize they dropped the ice cream all over and that they're going to clean it up. But as difficult as it might be in that moment to bite your tongue and to stand up and to go over to your kid and say, hey, you dripped ice cream on the floor, which is a fact, right? There's no feelings involved in that. You replace your feelings with facts, and you say, I would love for you to clean that up. And they clean it up. Little things like that. My son, he has a bad habit of not cleaning out his bowls when he has like cereal. And cereal can get really caked onto the bowl, and my wife will get frustrated with him at times. And I just said, just leave it to me. I'll take care of it, And so he, has a bowl that I see like in his room, and I'll say, Jake, take that to the sink and, give it a good scrub, clean it out, put it in the dishwasher. He's like, okay, Dad. And he'll do it. Sometimes he might wait too long and then he's got to scrub it longer. Yeah. But he's learning from the situation, as opposed to, hey, you gotta wash these, you gotta wash these damn dishes. What are you doing? As opposed to like just screaming at him, maybe having him not understand it, or have him just blow it off, or not want to participate in cleaning it up, or not want to do it. These are all things I found it really helpful and useful to talk to my children as if they're employees, or talk to them as if they're adults, just to give them the benefit of the doubt. They know what's going on, have the conversations with them, and just make sure they understand what's going on. There's no, like, my son will ask a lot of questions about drugs. He's 16.
Wow.
And I have him listen to like Sam Harris and Joe Rogan, and these are people that talk about psychedelics and talk about. So I'll say, yeah, Jake, actually, a lot of great music, a lot of great poems, a lot of great art, a lot of great things have come from people being high. But a lot of destructive shit has happened too. A lot of people die from alcohol abuse. A lot of people, there's a lot of trauma in homes from people being hooked on crystal meth and heroin and cocaine and all these things. So, but why not lay it all out there for him? Let him make the decisions. But why keep it so coveted? Why try to hold or protect, the ability, or why try to protect him or shield him from, you know, what mushrooms could do or something like that. Let him understand it, let him know it. And because the whole point in parenting is that you parent them to be strong enough to make their own decisions.
Exactly.
And so then you just inform them from there. You fill in the pieces, and that's the same way that you would coach somebody, the same way you would teach anybody. It's the same way you should be, really like you're coaching and teaching your children on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how you handle the nutrition stuff, knowing as much as you know. Because for me, like obviously you've seen some of my content, and I'm on parents all the time because all of my people are parents. And the story of Clovis exists. My first powder, the Perfect Paleo powder, was created in my kitchen. My niece was born terminally disabled. She was having like 300 plus seizures a day, and sped through a feeding tube, G tube, and everything. And what they were giving her in the hospital was bullshit. So I literally like talked to neurologists and stuff. And so anyway, I've researched the shit out of childhood nutrition. It is like my whole heart. I work with this woman, Hillary Boynton, in California, and I fund farm to table school lunch programs. Like it's like so important to get nutrition right for kids. But I am not a parent. I've never had kids. I'm a single bachelor. Like I live my life however I want. So it's so tricky. I wonder, like if I were in your shoes, how would I handle it? Like, oh my God, the kid's eating ice cream and that's toxic poison. Like, what do I do? You know, I get so stuck in this. Like, how do you handle that?
You know, life is really long and it takes a long time to develop. You know, I was probably 30 or I was about 30 before I ever really like had a path. You know, like I didn't have much of a path until I was 30 years old. So imagine parenting me. What a pain in the ass that would be. You'd be worried every day, you know. Luckily, I didn't get in trouble and stuff, but it did take me a long time. Life is long, you know, and just have faith in your children that they'll eventually start to get it and they'll eventually start to head in the right direction. With my children, since they were really young, I didn't have any problem sharing with them the fact that food can make you sick. Food can make you, I don't have any problem explaining fat and being fat and fatness in general, because being fat is unhealthy. Yeah. And so, I mean, as some people may get triggered or offended by that, but it's factual, you know, and I could communicate with them and I could say, hey, you know, Aunt so-and-so, like, she has to make trips to the hospital here and there because of, you know, A, B, and C. And it's very preventable. It's from, you know, it's from the foods that she eats. She makes poor decisions. And I could be explaining this in, you know, these educational opportunities that pop up as a parent, where your kid is saying, hey, can I have that cake? And you're like, well, you know, remember at lunch we had, you know, frozen yogurt. So you already had some sugar. And if you remember in the morning, you had some orange juice. I mean, the kids aren't going to keep track of any of this stuff. So somebody needs to. And yes, it would be great to keep them away from all this stuff. But realistically, I guess depending on the kind of parent you are, it might be overwhelmingly difficult to try to keep them away from everything all the time. You can't really have them in a bubble. And you wouldn't want them to find out all this stuff on their own either. That's probably not great. So, yeah, I think just explaining to them and being very upfront about what nutrition can do. I think sometimes people come from a place of trying to explain, you know, how nutrition can help make you big and strong. But I don't think that's enough. I think that's too soft of a message, and I don't think that explains. They need to know that food can be very negative. They need to understand that it can be when you eat too much of it, and then so you can say your child comes into the kitchen and they search through the pantry and they search through the fridge and they just didn't see anything. That happens to my kids all the time. They just didn't see anything they can grab, you know. And then so I'll ask them, I'll say, are you hungry? And they're like, oh, I'm just kind of looking for something to eat. And I'll say, there's actually a filet mignon that I cooked up last
Yeah.
night that we still have some leftover. I can heat that up for you. Or there's some chicken, you know, mom made a chicken salad last night. I can prepare that for you, help you out with that if you need it. And they'll say, nah, it's just, you know, it's proof that they're not actually hungry, you know. So to try to teach your children about, you know, I would try to teach them like, hey, you're going to try your best to mainly only eat when you're actually hungry. You know, if you're not hungry for an apple, then you're probably not hungry. I tell adults usually, like, if you're not hungry for some hard boiled eggs or protein in general, you're probably not hungry, probably
Yeah.
just kind of bored, you know. And so sometimes I'll kind of change the subject with my kids and say, hey, you want to go for a walk, or hey, you want to do this, you want to do that. But I have taught them from when they were really young the positive and negative impact of certain foods and what it can do. And I've also have been teaching them since they were really young that I don't really want them to ever have to be on a diet.
Yeah.
You know, and so they'll say they'll ask me questions about my diet, and I'll say, look, you know, my diet is kind of a little bit more for like bodybuilding and performance enhancing. Like I'm on the extreme. Like you don't ever have to participate in this weirdness that is my diet, you know. And
Sure.
I was fatter as a kid and stuff too, so I'm always kind of battling that. And then this is like my beliefs of stuff that I feel that I need to be doing to feel good about myself, you know.
Yeah.
And when I'm trying to lay it out for them, I'm like, I would like for you to just not ever have to really worry about it. So if you have decent nutritional, if you have decent nutrition throughout your life, you probably don't really need a diet, and you're moving. My son, he doesn't really like to be all that active. And we were on a walk the other day. I try to get him to participate in some walks with me here and there. We were on a walk the other day, and we were talking about like food and stuff. And I said, well, one option is like if you love certain foods, then you just need to make sure you don't eat too much of them, you know, like, and if you don't like activity, if you don't like lifting, and I've explained how lifting is like this, this thing that can kind of buy them some insurance into being able to eat more. You know, if you have more muscle mass, if your body fat percentage is better. But yeah, from the time they were really young, and some people maybe don't agree with it, but I've been talking to them about how it can increase body fat and how body fat can be detrimental to their health. I've never said one thing about fat affecting your looks. I've never, you know, they can come to whatever conclusion they want on that, but I never said like, if you get fat, people won't like you. I never said anything like that, but it was more like just, hey, look, you know, excess body fat, and it can limit you as well. Like just in sports, my daughter likes volleyball, and it's like, you know, if you're heavier, it's going to be hard to jump. It's going to be harder to participate. It's going to be, you know, it's going to make things more difficult for you.
Yeah, I like those reference points too. Like when you mentioned an aunt, you can say like, hey, you know how your aunt has to go to the hospital? You don't say like, hey, you know how your aunt is gross? You know, like nothing like that. It's like they got to go to the hospital. Another thing I like, since you mentioned your son is 16, something that I try to help parents get across to kids is these giant problems that kids deal with. One in particular that everyone understands is acne. It's like, hey, you know that kid that has like the pizza face at school, kind of gets made fun of? Like, let's talk about gut health. And let's get into that whole thing and how inflammation works and blah, 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 and kind of speak their language with these reference points like you're talking about. I think that's super powerful. But I've gotten pushback too in my content for being like, I don't think there's anything wrong with telling, you know, your young child that soda is probably pretty toxic, you know, it's like, and you don't want to overdo it.
Look what happened when we didn't talk about racism.
That's a great point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if we don't talk about being fat in the household, there's going to be a lot of negative consequences, and it won't be the same obviously as racism, but
sure.
You know, I think it's important to talk about race, to talk about racism, to talk about these things, talk about these matters. Is it okay to joke about it? Is it okay to, you know, like I have friends that are many different races. We have a lot of different employees here. Is it acceptable? You know, like what's acceptable? They're all this stuff. It's always good to have conversations about it because you don't know what's unacceptable. even just joking, I mean, actors, we pretty much constantly joke about being fat. It's like a reference.
Yeah.
We even have like protocols called fat shaming, and fat shaming is like us doing like powerlifting cardio, which is like not really a lot of cardio, but it's just like pushing a sled or like doing some of these things. And so, you know, we communicate that way a lot. We talk that way a lot, but also we have certain people in the gym that are heavy, and when it comes to like the fat jokes, I only call people fat when they're not fat usually, you know what I mean, like because it's just a teasing thing that we say, or I might tell someone you know, hey, don't be fat about it or whatever, and they say the same thing to me, and it's like it's a cultural thing, but it's something that some of us communicate about. But again, maybe it's something that's not, like, maybe it's not accepted by one person, so maybe it's good to have a conversation of, hey, should we be messing around like this? Because maybe it's not
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe it's not in our best interest. You know, much like locker room talk, right? Like, it's like, does that go too far? Do people say stuff that they're not supposed to say? I think it's good to lay all these things out on the table and to try to figure out, is that really progressing shit forward? Or is it just kind of, you know, sometimes it's just fun to mess around with your buddy and to tell him that he's a dickhead, right?
Yeah. Well, the good thing too, man, is like, so this is super non-PC, but it's my podcast. So I'm like, all right, let's do it. So I grew up in New England. I grew up in Rhode Island, and New England has its own place. You know, I'm glad that Rogan's talked about it on his pod. He just had Bill Burr on his podcast talking about it. Like, I went to school in Boston, grew up in Rhode Island. It's very like mafia town, tough guy. Like, it's hardcore like that. So Bill Burr has this skit, and it's on YouTube, and it's called "What Are You, a Fag?" And like, what are you, a fag, right? And he goes through this whole thing where he says, like, you know, he thinks that's why men have heart attacks young, because he's like, anytime you want to like hug a puppy, admit a baby's cute, you can't do it. And I grew up literally like, it's like, if you use an umbrella in the rain, you're a pussy. If you don't fight, you're a pussy. If you don't hook up with girls, you're a pussy. Like this constant, this like shaming thing. So there's the way that you're talking about it, which it can be
I grew
fun.
up the same way. I grew up on the East Coast, and like, you know, maybe for other parts of the country, maybe it was similar too. Just maybe it's you know, my age or something like that. But like, yeah, I heard gay, and like then you realize like, oh shit, like that shit ain't cool. Like you know, I was so naive and just not even recognizing. That's how bad it was for me. Like not even recognizing.
Oblivious. Yeah.
Completely oblivious. And it makes you feel like a real shithead. You're like, oh my God, like I could be really, you know, putting down an entire group of people that I didn't mean to. Yeah. And what I would say about stuff like that is for me personally, that's never my intent. Like I'm a big softy. Like I'm never trying to hurt anybody. I'm never outwardly you know, lashing out at anybody, especially now, you know, now, you know, now that I'm older, I don't have any of that in me, you know, to do any of that. But yeah, when I was a kid, that's the way things were said to me. You know, I remember like I would want to play a certain sport and my brothers would be like, that's gay. You know, like everything was stupid, or it was gay, or there was no explanation about like why not to do something. It was just like labeled this one particular thing. And it's like, now you look back at it, you're like, that's completely asinine. None of that makes any sense.
It's ridiculous.
Leaves you very confused.
Yeah. What was crazy too is, so I started playing piano when I was 8 years old. Loved Billy Joel. Like no 8-year-old born in 1986 like liked Billy Joel. This is weird. Like people liked pop music, right? I was obsessed. I asked my parents if I could take piano lessons at 8 years old, and I never told anyone that I played piano. Like I was playing 6 hours a day, never told anyone, because playing piano was gay where I grew up. I'm like, I don't know why. Like playing guitar was cool, playing piano was gay. So like I'm this tough guy. So I just played piano secretly. And then at 17 years old, like I played this talent show in my high school, sold out crowd. I ended up on the news. The next thing I know, I'm the coolest guy on the planet. All the chicks like me. And I'm like, wait a minute. My whole life I was told this thing was gay and I hid it from everybody. you know, but you're like,
well, and all the macho, all the quote unquote macho manly shit that you would participate in, only other dudes would usually like that.
absolutely. And I talked to so many girls about that as I got older, where they're just like, I don't give a shit if you have a six pack. And I certainly don't like when you fight. That's stupid.
Yeah. Imagine you're in you're in seventh grade or something. And, you know, people find out that you're really good at writing poetry or something.
You're doomed.
Yeah. All the dudes are going to be like, what a sissy, you know, but all the girls are like, oh my God, he's so smart. And they're, you know, it's yeah, we have some weird things that in society that don't make any sense. I remember when I was a kid, I got into powerlifting really young, and powerlifting was weird and strange. And so, you know, my mom would, you know, call the school and tell them that I broke a state or national record in powerlifting. And I was embarrassed by that just because it was different. It wasn't football. It wasn't basketball. It wasn't baseball. They would announce my name and they'd say like what I lifted or whatever. And I would just like creep down in my chair as they were announcing it on the loudspeaker before we, you know, did the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever.
Wow.
And I remember just turning like purple, you know, just like being so embarrassed by it. And then my teacher would ask questions about it and I'd just get even more embarrassed. And I just, no one else did it. You know, no one else was like lifting, like not even like people that played football and stuff. It was just, I mean, they were lifting, you know, but not to that extent and not those kind of weights and stuff. And especially not when I was that, you know, I was super young. And so nobody was lifting at that age. And so it was just, really foreign. Yeah. I just remember like being like, you know, and then sometimes even girls would ask, they were like, what is that you did? And I was like, oh, I don't know. What does this mean? And I did like a deadlift. And they're like, is that where you put it up over your head? And I'm like, oh, no, not really. Stop talking to me. You're giving me a boner.
But dude, it's so interesting too, because we talked at the beginning of the episode too, where it's like everyone is obsessed with these accolades. Like we want accolades, but now you look back on it, like we both were really good at things that other people weren't good at, but it wasn't the right accolade. It's like, I wanted the different accolades, not that one. Like, it's so fucking crazy. Like, we're just complicated apes, man.
Yeah, it shows you how difficult it is. I mean, you know, being an adult is difficult, and being a kid is like impossible.